Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Parkhill. I'm the director of brand storytelling. And today I'm excited to be joined by Richard Yelland. Richard's a filmmaker, storyteller deluxe. He's the Emmy-nominated Webby-winning filmmaker. Um, I just had the chance to watch his a new film of his that's coming out on PBS, The Birth of the Endless Summer. Such a great film, all about the life of Dick Metz. Um, going to be on PBS. I'll let you tell us about that. But Richard, great to have you here. Want you to tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and the company that you've launched, and we'll talk about this new film you have in development, Mrs. Pipeline.
Thank you. Great to be here, Rick, and super excited to speak about the projects leading up to today and also what's coming. You mentioned Birth of the Endless Summer, and I was fortunate to tell the story of Dick Metz. He travels from 1958 to 1961. Some of the greatest travel adventures of all time. I mean, pre-Jack Kerouac, pre-motorcycle. Dick Metz was one of the original adventure travelers, and he vagabonded around the globe, hopping steamships, hitchhiking, braving, wild animals in Africa, somehow coming out alive and managing to hitchhike all the way down to South Africa, where he found.
Yeah, and took a surfboard with him, right?
Well, actually, you know what? I think at some point he borrowed a surfboard in Australia, but by the time he got to Africa, he was lucky just to get a ride. I mean, he would sit by the side of the road for hours and sometimes days to pick up a ride, but he picked up a ride from the middle of Africa, and he wanted to get to Victoria Falls, and some guy in an old Volvo with a bunch of gas strapped to the car came along and said, "I'll take you to Victoria Falls." And so that was that. Dick went on the way to Victoria Falls. When he got there, it was pitch black. There were only a few fires in the distance, and he said to the guy, "Where are you going again? I might just stick with you." And he said, "Cape Town." And so Dick said, "Well, maybe I'll just go to Cape Town instead." And that was a decision that actually changed the course of surfing history and would eventually inspire Bruce Brown to film one of the greatest surf films, if not greatest documentaries of all time, one of the greatest travel stories of all time, The Endless Summer. So got to Cape Town, South Africa, met a surfer named John Whitmore, who was actually making surfboards and surfing waves like Cape St. Francis. And the rest was history.
Yeah, what a great story. That's going to be out on PBS when, Richard?
August, we're having a PBS SoCal release. They're going to premiere it and do an Emmy run in the LA market and all over SoCal, and then it will roll out from there to all the national markets across the country. So everyone's going to finally get a chance to see it. We've been touring to select theaters for the last couple of years because pandemic and all that slowed us down on our release schedule. So now finally the people have been waiting to see it can finally see it on PBS starting in August, and they can check it out at Birth of the Endless Summer on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, listen, tell us a little bit about your career path and launch of your production company and how this has all come about.
Yeah, it's a unique story in that I came from advertising as a writer and a creative director, and I founded my company, Curtis Birch, in 2000, more a creative storytelling company. We really focus on the traditional creative agency model, but the opportunity to really pursue purpose-driven work inspired by my passions in action sports, public service, working on behalf of the ocean and sustainability. I really started channeling storytelling that made a difference, and that opened up the opportunity to do documentary film around some of our purpose-driven work. So I was doing projects with the Life Rolls On Foundation. We actually founded a nonprofit that became part of the Life Rolls On Foundation called They Will Surf Again, where we were taking people with spinal cord injuries surfing. And then that became a program of the Life Rolls On Foundation. And that work of allowing people in wheelchairs to go surfing and experience that, we built this program with volunteers, and it was material for my first film, Floating the Nathan Gocke Story, which was executive produced by Oscar winner Morgan Spurlock, who we sadly lost in the last weeks. But Morgan was a great collaborator and very generous contributor to that project, and really set us off down the path of documentary that could make a lasting impact, stories that could stand the test of time, that had long shelf life, that had purpose behind it, and using the tools that we learned from big ad agencies. Like I started at J. Walter Thompson, and hiring famous film directors like Dominic Sena, who did one of Brad Pitt's early movies, California. Watching him and how he made commercials really was our film school, and taught us how we can put together compelling visual stories, or narratives that really can drive home a message, whether 30-second or as we moved into long format documentary. So other films that came that made a difference, with 12 Miles North, the Nick Gabaldon story that we did with Nike, which was a Webby Award winner, for basically telling the story of the first documented African-American surfer named Nick Gabaldon. And now there is a National Historic Site at that beach in Los Angeles, where Nick Gabaldon learned to surf, and his story really galvanized the Black surfing movement. And it's been amazing to watch. It resulted in a National Historic Site where Nick Gabaldon learned to surf the Inkwell Beach, as they called it back then, the self-segregated beach in LA in the 1940s. But it was a powerful story, and we did a great job telling it. It won the Webby that year, and it's just great to see that kind of story live on. And I think when we're looking at important stories that can last a year, 2 years, that really gave us that motivation to look at films like Birth of the Endless Summer as pieces of history and important milestones that, like, if we make the film great and we do the storytelling right, and if we are working with brand partners or nonprofit partners, we know how to integrate those partners in the storytelling, and that everyone really wins in the end. And we've seen just as time goes by that the value in those kind of projects. So that definitely brought us to this next exciting project, Mrs. Pipeline.
Well, I think it's awesome the way that, I mean, when you can mix your passions, great things come from that. So you're mixing passion for surfing, for filmmaking, storytelling, and philanthropy.
That's right.
And the result is magnificent work that has a real impact on people. So listen, I'd love to hear about, what the inspiration for Mrs. Pipeline is, because I've spent a little time at that beach at Aokai State Park, and have so much respect for that wave at Pipeline, and for what the women are doing there today is, something I never would imagine. When I lived there in the 70s, and there were a lot of women in the water. There weren't any, but they're crushing it now. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, in doing Birth the End this summer, we came across Joyce Hoffman's story of being the first female to surf at Pipeline. And she was encouraged by that group of surfers that were on the Hobie team. She was one of the first women to pioneer women's professional surfing, was the first signature model from Hobie. And that was all her undoing. She was really speaking up for herself as a surfer. She's like, I have more world champions than the other guys on the team. Why don't I have my own signature?
Yeah.
And Joyce Hoffman was really inspirational in looking at the women's side of surfing. And so when I was approached with another untold story in the sport of surfing, and looking at the original pioneer of Pipeline, the original Mr. Pipeline, Butch VanArtsdalen, and interestingly enough, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to tell that story if I can't find a way to talk about what the women are doing, because I just watched Moana Wong Jones win the historical first women's pipe masters contest. So she was a pipe pro winner, and the first in history, a native Hawaiian who was a Hawaiian studies major, who had this relationship with the wave, and that was her life. And it wasn't about contest surfing, it was about her passion for Pipeline. And so to connect the dots from Butch VanArtsdalen, I had this idea that there's got to be some kind of similar gene or some kind of similar storyline that when we look at Butch VanArtsdalen and how he literally rode a wave that was thought to be unrideable. I mean, Phil Edwards rode it, but he just sort of rode the shoulder and kicked out. But Butch was the first to get barreled, and he was the one that passed the torch to Jerry Lopez. And Laird Hamilton even called Butch the the father of tube riding. And so, and you look at McGillivray's 5 Summer Stories, and you see Butch's iconic ride at Pipeline. And
yeah, where he sits down on the board at the end, and
and
was that Greg McGillivray that shot that happened to be at Pipe that day and shot Butch?
Yes, and Bruce Brown was there too, so he has different angles on it, but it's not quite the shot that Greg had. And Greg had a slightly more cinematic take on it. I gotta ask him actually now what kind of camera, what kind of film he was shooting on. I mean, Bruce's footage looks great, don't get me wrong, but he was a little off axis. Like, Greg was right there, and when I interviewed Greg about Butch, he was hanging out with Butch and following him around, and Butch kind of knew where the wind and swell and tide was right, and so he was on it with Butch. And that would explain why that when that great day at Pipeline came and Butch got that iconic ride, that Greg was the guy with the camera set up in the right place for it.
Well, hey, let's do this. Rather than talk about it, let's show folks the trailer, huh? And let them see that great Butch VanArtsdalen ride.
Okay.
Let's play the trailer.
Nothing will top the first time the world's got to see Butch VanArtsdalen Pipeline.
Everyone went crazy.
How could somebody be so casual, so cool? Right there, he was dubbed Mr. Pipeline.
Butch was probably the most gifted athlete, and surfing became his hallmark.
If there's something he wanted to do in a wave, he could do it.
The guys who were there at the beach, they looked up to him. He was kind of the boss.
He always had a smile on his face, the life of the party, the guy that you wanted to be hanging with.
He felt like a big brother is what he felt like, and just someone that would always stick up for me.
Wind and Sea was all a training ground for him to go to Hawaii.
Hawaii had bigger waves, faster waves, more dangerous waves.
The boards still were big, they were clunky, they were heavy. And at a place like Pipeline, the boards just didn't fit into the wave. Rarely did the guys make it.
Pipeline is another animal. It's a fearsome place. You can die out there.
Butch, he was the first guy to pretty much own the spot, really ride it and exploit it.
I don't think it's like any other surf spot in the world. If you can cut it and make the grade at Pipeline, in the world of surfing, you've reached a top level.
At the time when I was first wanting to surf backdoor and pipe, everybody was like, oh, no, you're too gnarly for women. That's like where the boys are. And I was like, what? Like, I want to go. I want to try it. Biggest part is taking the challenge, doing the things that people said were impossible. And then women surfing really started to explode.
At first, I didn't even want anybody to see me walking down the beach to paddle out. It just seemed like unnatural that a girl by herself was paddling out to Pipeline. 2 years of just sitting out there and watching the guys and seeing how they did it, I was like, okay, like I think I kind of know what to do.
Moana Joan Swong has just won the Billabong Pro Pipeline!
She put women's surfing on her shoulders and carried it into credibility of Pipeline.
It was such a historic moment that everybody could triumph in that victory together. The best moment in women's surfing.
Absolutely a dream come true. Pipeline changed my life.
This wave's terrifying. I respect everyone who wants a part of it and really thankful for this wave.
To be surfing the Pipe Masters with my family's background, it's a huge honor. Women are finally a part of it.
Butch showed everybody something that most people thought was impossible. I'm gonna take that and try to progress.
Wow. Well, there's some eye candy in that trailer. This is, what a great teaser for the film, Richard.
Well, I mean, we're just so fortunate. When you look at the history of pipeline, you have the most iconic surfers in history, from Butch VanArtsdalen, Jerry Lopez, Rory Russell, to Sean Thompson, to Sonny Garcia. Yeah, the Hoes, Coco Ho, and then onto the women like Rochelle Ballard, obviously being a real trailblazer at pipeline and really showing women, hey, you can really get barreled out there, and and then really just passing that torch on to this next generation of women. And what was really cool and revelatory in interviewing Moana was that the Hoes took her under their wing and really recognized that Moana was dedicated to pipeline. She sat there for months just watching from the shoulder, and eventually Derek and Michael would say, hey, we recognize you're putting your time in. You are like us. We were out here in the rain and the wind when it was blowing out. Like, we're going to give you a wave. And so that's how Moana got her in. And it's interesting because when I interviewed Ian Cairns, world champion Kanga, here, a local Laguna resident, he was like, someone must have been giving Moana waves because she's so far ahead of the other females who just haven't had a chance to catch waves out there. And so it was that dedication she had to just be out there and figure it out. And then the guys like John and Jamie O'Brien would be like, okay, it's your turn, Moana, you go. And so she started getting a hang of it out there, and
so for viewers who aren't part of this, the surf, culture, and like the pecking order at Pipeline is intense. To earn yourself a spot in the lineup where you can actually catch a wave could take years, right? I mean, for these women to make their way into the peak, and for men to stand back and say, your wave, Moana, there's a lot of respect there.
Yeah.
And well earned, so earned.
Most definitely. And this is kind of a cool thing. I'm realizing the connection point between looking at my film 12 Miles North and Nick Gabaldon's story. Nick Gabaldon is an African-American who paddled 12 miles to surf Malibu with Ricky Grigg, Buzzy Trent, Peter Cole, Mickey Munoz. He was accepted because he was respected as a waterman, as someone who went to the ends of the earth to achieve his dream of surfing. He risked his life. He crossed racial boundaries. So there's a certain respect there that's inherent in surfing. That I think is what's so cool we're seeing with the women, is that the men will be the first to say how awesome it is to have the women out there with them. Obviously it took a while for the tipping point, but to see now it happening with then, after Moana's win, you see finally Carissa Moore really stepping up and winning at Pipeline. And then the next generation like Katie Simmers and coming and taking the most recent pipe masters for the women. And so these women now getting their chance at Pipeline during these contests and getting to train there, getting their reps in, that you're seeing the proliferation. And then you're seeing them perform at waves like Chopu. If you just watch the Tahiti contest, now the performances are just like, and it's as high a level as the men. It's just a different thing, and arguably maybe more of a ballet, more of that kind of dance between life and death. It's just amazing to watch. I mean, Greg McGillivray in Five Summer Stories, he has a chapter on the women. He was always keeping an eye on the women because, it's just, as a surfer myself in the water, I love to surf with women. You just can't deny it. And I think
there's no denying that they're far more stylish than us dudes.
That's right. Yes.
Hey, listen, I want to ask you a couple of questions here about this film, because to me it seems like a totally brand-friendly film, right? Women in sports are getting their much-deserved time in the sun right now. I mean, this year, the whole Caitlin Clark phenomena. I'm actually watching the WNBA right now and enjoying it so much, and it's just I think women's sports has taken a quantum leap forward here in the last year or two. A lot of women would say, hey, we've been fighting for this for a long time and scratching and clawing, but it's happening. And it's so great to see. And so I really applaud you for this film and the focus on women at Pipeline.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what the brand opportunities are for this film, right? Because I think you've got quite a bit of shooting left to do, don't you?
Yeah, we've got about 2/3 of the film left to shoot. So there's a lot of opportunity to incorporate brands that are organically fitting into a Hawaiian lifestyle, to travel, to surf, the kind of equipment and preparation that we need to be at our best. Like I said, as a surfer, it's so important to have everything prepped and ready, and our equipment right, and our travel right, and our timing right, and our schedule right, everything, because those swells come specific time of year, like where are we going to stay, how are we going to sleep, how are we going to get there, how are we going to get to the break, what kind of sunscreen is best for us so we don't get skinned, all those things. But I mean, I think that what's cool is about a film like this with so many different athletes as well, we can, and I saw that with Birth of the End of the Summer, that when there's a story attached as well, we're not necessarily, these aren't athlete profiles that are specifically athlete because we want to do a story around a specific athlete. This is a story around the evolution of Pipeline, from the original pioneer to the new pioneers, which are women. So, I think that what that allows us to do is incorporate themes around women in sport that are inspirational. And I found through my work with Nike and other brands that are part of content that is actually truly a film first, that when you can insert those brands in those kind of inspirational narratives and those stories that can last the test of time, there's so much value and shelf life for the brands that are part of it. Part of it is obviously doing our due diligence and finding out who's a great fit and who's really willing to dig in with us and collaborate with us, because we do want to talk to the CMOs and the head of brand content, know what their strategy is. We do want to talk to their in-house social teams, and we want to be able to deliver content for them while we're shooting this film, so that they have the ability to develop narrative that's brand centric alongside as we develop our film, and then that allows us to build toward a timeline of release. So what's really cool about this model we found is that as we build story, they can have brand centric story coming along their timeline leading to our release, and then as we release to film festivals and in distribution, there can be activations with the brands around those premieres and around those releases that give all sorts of opportunity then to present the brand in a really cool way. So that way we can keep the film true and organic to the story. They can have their more branded pieces, and develop that on the side to serve their strategies. And then as we then come to a release, everyone can celebrate together. The brand can then, and we can celebrate the brand's involvement to allow us to get to these premieres. We can have our brand partners part of our Q&As because they are true partners in the project. And that is when, and coming from advertising, understanding that when the strategy takes over a project, that isn't good for the brand or for us. So what we like to do is really, we'll work on with the custom content, we'll work on their strategy for those deliveries. We can create this film that we know is going to be a great film, that's going to be festival worthy, that's going to travel to global film festivals. We know at this point we're going to have a great global release through different channels around the world, from North America to South America to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa to Europe. We can, now count on those things. The film has a great market for it. It has shelf life. And then the brands also have their deliverables on strategy as well. And then also they can take part in those release activations.
So Richard, tell me about the story itself and every documentary unfolds as you chase the story down.
Yeah,
right.
Very good point.
So what, you got 2/3 of you've shot some already. But what's the story you're chasing down? Is it particular individuals? Is it the upcoming competition for the next Pipe Masters? What's the story you're going to chase?
That's a really good question, because it's kind of a twofold thing. We definitely want to see what's going on with Moana and how her story is going to unfold. As someone who isn't necessarily, first and foremost a contest surfer, but happens to have won the pipeline contest now twice and is truly known as the Queen of Pipeline. So there is kind of a narrative there that we can't resist, where like, where is her career going? You know, she gets her wild card at WSL. How is she going to go up the ranks on the WQS? Like, I would love to see Moana involved in more personally the story, what happens with her career as a professional surfer. It's an interesting narrative there. Also, then the women behind her, obviously the ones that are in the top 10 on the WSL, how are they now performing at Pipeline? Like we said, Katie Simmers, what's she going to do in her career? I mean, she is poised to be potentially the John Florence or Kelly Slater on the women's side of her generation. So watching her story unfold. Also, someone like Coco Ho, who is a real strong female person in surfing, who's really been outspoken and been at the forefront of pushing women's surfing to the point it is now, and her speaking on behalf of her family's heritage at Pipeline, digging into her story a little bit and kind of getting a little more background on what it means to be a Hawaiian, what it means to be part of a Pipeline legacy. So following these storylines, and like you said, as what's great about documentary and why I was insistent on tying in the new pioneers, as I call them, is because that's a living story arc. And that is, or we do not know exactly what's going to happen. And those are the things we want to find out as viewers. And I want to find out as a filmmaker. Right.
And the interesting thing about surfing too is like some of the best surfers are not competitive surfers. I mean, you know this as a surfer. I mean, you think about Laird Hamilton. I mean, he's like probably one of the best known waterman surfers of our time. He's not a competitive surfer. He's just out leading the charge on giant waves and pioneering stuff. You don't have to compete to be a surf legend. Butch VanArtsdalen wasn't really a competitive surfer, was he? I don't think Phil Edwards was.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And this is actually one I wanted to bring up. We're thinking alike here because Fred Hemming said it, and it relates to Moana and it relates to Butch VanArtsdalen, is that there's something in that DNA that they want to explore something that hasn't been conquered yet, and that they want to push through that. And that's way different than that mentality that I want to win that contest. So like you said, Butch, you know, he had a chance to be a professional athlete in baseball, but he gave that up to go to Hawaii and push the frontier of big wave surfing there in Hawaii. So he gave, you know, that was his life's pursuit. And that is a special kind of explorer DNA. That's like, you know, Admiral Byrd stuff, or, you know, the first guy to the top of Everest. So, you know, that is, and Moana was like right on it, and you'll see it in the trailer. She's like, I want to push those boundaries like Butch did, you know, and she's not super familiar with Butch's story like I am, but she is familiar with that feeling of having to really stick your neck out, risk your life, and do something that is like never been done. Like, women just didn't go out of Pipeline. She was scared to walk across the parking lot, you know? So,
it's horrifying out there.
I mean, I remember I interviewed junior world champion. It was Kai Barger, I believe, in a Michelle Perez, and top 10, former top 10 pipe. He's a pipe master too. And they're like, just paddle out there. Don't even go in the channel, and you'll see, because we're scared. I mean, you know, they're scared. The guys that have a pipe master, they're scared. And so I was like, oh, I'll watch from the beach. You know, I don't know if I'll ever do that. But I mean, you can get scared of that place just watching it. So
yeah, I can't tell you how many times I paddled out there and just sat in the channel watching it, and then paddled back in. Like, I'm not going out there.
Yeah,
it's amazing how fast that wave starts moving when it hits the reef. It's just it's insane. So I mean, these women are so brave. Anybody that rides that wave is brave, but these women are really putting it out there, and they're going right. They're going backdoor pipeline too, which is even scarier.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think what we're gonna learn too in telling this story is get a little bit more into the mindset, you know, of these women, which I'm gonna love. I mean, I did a film called Sine Qua Non with the psychology of big wave surfing with Greg Long, and it was really just him telling, as the as the world's most decorated big wave surfer, like what's on his mind, like what pushed him to be the first surfer at Cortez Bank to pursue a 100-foot wave, like what was he thinking? Like that's just interesting. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the minds of some of these competitors and these women, because we're going to show, and I have a daughter in Division I sports and volleyball, and the level of volleyball, it's probably one of the most exciting sports happening right now. It's definitely the fastest growing women's sport. Most women, most people ever attending a women's sporting event was a Nebraska volleyball game they held in their football stadium. So it was like 100,000 people. Like this is because the level is so high and it's so amazing to watch. And there's something about the intensity of the women, the athletes, and the competitive nature that I think that's something cool to explore here.
Yeah, I think for viewers getting to know these women and how they think and how they train, training outside of it's not just paddling out a pipeline, but it's getting in the sort of physical shape they need to be able to catch and ride that wave and survive it. So their whole lifestyle and training and mindset, I mean, getting to know those characters has got so many story arc opportunities. I can't wait to see it, Richard.
Yeah, thank you. And appreciate your interest, and really looking forward to talking to anyone who's interested in developing it further with us, because like I said, I think with so many great athletes and potential storylines, we can dial up and dial down certain things that will enhance the project. That's why I call it a collaborative process, where we're able to get in and talk to people, because we're always looking for, as documentary filmmakers, the next best idea, and we're continually seeking through the process. So anytime we get together with brand partners or nonprofit partners or fellow producers, we're always pushing new ideas, like what's going to make it better. And so I think when we get the right team together, we found really good results. And I think that's what's been really cool over the last 10 years, that I've been able to, in a way, create a model working with brands where we've been able to create award-winning, like lasting impact with these films that people are going back to 10 years later. We just had a screening at the local historic South Coast Laguna Theater up 12 miles north, which now 10 years later inspired a generation of Black surfers and filmmakers. So, these are kind of things that we as pioneers in brand storytelling, you and Brand Storytellers, your company, that we are pushing this new frontier, and we're showing the way on how we can tell amazing stories, create amazing entertainment content with brand partners that get it, who are like great fit, and that become incredible creative partners and help us all fulfill a better world. When you attach purpose to it, I mean, there's definitely a mission at the center of Mrs. Pipeline, not just to make sure that this chapter in history, how we went from Mr. Pipeline to Mrs. Pipeline, but also then to like a more equitable world, on land, in the water. And then those are the kind of things that are help us solve our bigger social and environmental problems that we're all.
The shelf life that these films will have has got to be so. I mean, here we're Endless Summer. People are still flocking to see Endless Summer after all these years, or go back and watch it again and again. Yeah, this film has that same opportunity, that this is a moment in time when women are pioneering the most dangerous wave on earth. It's a film that their daughters will go see, and their daughters will see. It's going to be a film for the ages, Richard. So, hey, I thank you so much for spending the time with us today. Yeah. And all the best, and I'll see you in the water, man.
Yeah, for sure. And shout out to Bruce Brown and Greg McGillivray too, because they have been generous supporters of these projects. Without them creating these films like The Endless Summer and 5 Summer Stories, and then allowing us access to their archives and to their stories, allows us to bring new storytelling to the great work that they did previously. Because these kind of filmmakers were able to capture these moments in time that are timeless, and then we're able to build on that, you know. And again,
that's a whole nother film you need to put into development, Richard, is the Greg McGillivray Bruce Brown story, you know.
Yeah, I have it in the outtakes.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I talked to Greg about that. We have that already filmed. It's right now, you know, in between the edits. That
All right,
like,
man, thanks so much.
Yeah,
this has been terrific. Enjoy spending time with you, and we'll look forward to seeing what happens with Mrs. Pipeline. We'll be staying tuned.